Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. Nyoro has challenged President Ruto and his broad-based brother that the current size of the government is huge. But ultimately, it can actually work with half the current size. In a very cryptic message, Nyoro is saying that the current size is big and unnecessarily big, and according to him, it can work half the current size. Kindly subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell, and like our videos. Thank you very much for supporting this podcast and also for supporting our April project that we will finish this weekend in Embu. Of course, the house we're building for Virginia, so we'll go back to Embu this weekend, strictly for economic empowerment, to make sure we fence the home and also put for her some cuckoos and boozes so that the house will come a long way with an economic empowerment. Nyoro is saying this: Kenya can function optimally with half the size of the current government. If government was a loaf of bread, you could cut it in half and ordinary citizens like my grandmother won't even notice because the service delivery won't be affected. So long as service delivery is not affected, the current government can work half the size. I don't know what you think about this. Yeah, people who understand. And Nyoro is also in a very cryptic message. He has had 3 messages for the president. The second message is, within the first 2 years, you can choose to do what the job you are given to do, or choose politics. On the side, you can spend all the time politicking without doing the real work that you are given.
You can spend a lot of time fixing your politics and you neglect the role at which you are actually elected to do. That's something profound that I learned in my first 2 years. That you can spend a lot of time trying to fix your competitor, trying to fix and follow where the person who may want your seat has gone to, trying to silence somebody maybe in social media or elsewhere, provoking you to do something better. Or you can actually choose to spend that time doing the work itself. And I realized it is very important that as a leader, you focus on something that can stand the test of time. Because, for example, when we have an argument with Dr. Rugo here, whom is also my good friend, if we have an argument here on words will not go past that argument. But if there is some deliverable, you do something tangible, it will go beyond the argument, it will go beyond words. And I realized that it is important you spend your time as a leader addressing the issues that are not necessarily things that you are proving through word of mouth, but things you'll do that are all seasonal. And these things that are all seasonal are the deliverables you do around the sectors that you should be working around.
I know that Nyoro on the other end, we've really doubted his stand. And many of us, of course, looking at how he responds to issues, the much hyped press briefing in the KICC, in the floor of KICC, that really didn't meet the expectation of many. But one thing you can't take away from him is the fact that when he was, for the last 2 years, he's been performing well as a member of parliament. I want us to get into that message. When on budget, he actually repeats and says something that several experts have been telling the president. As we talk, the president is in dilemma and stranded, even with the whole economic council are stranded, because there is a balance between, do I add taxes? Do I increase more taxes. And as the executive tries to flex the tax policies, is it going to respond positively by increasing the tax revenue? The question is big. And Ndindi Nyoro is telling the president, increasing tax policies does not necessarily mean that you're going to scoop more.
Sometimes we confuse that you add tax rate, you get more revenue. It is a fallacy. At some point you get to Rafa's curve and it starts descending. That the more you increase, the more you distort economic decisions. So if I was to buy a car, I see you've already paying for my money, so I hold back that expenditure. Holding back that expenditure means even the retro you could have gotten, you'll not get it. That is something I have seen we have also to take very seriously as a country. So that even as we make tax policies and revenue policies, let's look, and it cannot be arbitrary. I mean, you cannot just sit down and say, now tunapeleka hii kodi hapa, you get more money. There has to be some research based on it. There has to be some thorough analysis based on it. There has to be thorough sampling. There has to be thorough work in it by coming up with a rate that maximizes revenue without making people distort their economic decisions or market to distort its decision making. We did the finance bill of 2023, which was fairly debated as the one for last year. Now, this is the most shocking thing. The Kenyan revenue to GDP ratio in the year 2023-2024 was around 16%. I want you to see the trend. In the year 2019-2020 was around 15%. In the year 2023, that year, was 14 point something percent. In this current year, up to date, it is around 14.7%. Now, when you do robust revenue raising measures in terms of policy, they should come with commensurate revenue from it. Kodi ikiongezewa, for example, pay, there should be commensurate revenue in the basket of revenue from this money you have taxed. Tunashikana hapo. Why is it that even when you raise the rate, then in the basket of money there is not that money? Why is it that the revenue growth in Kenya never noticed finance bill of 2023? That the graph, if you are given a graph without labeling, you will not pinpoint those 2 years. You will not see them because the revenue never changed other than the ordinary changes it usually has. I'm talking about that analysis of revenue maximizing tax rate. Why is it that even when we have a very corrosive, when we have a very debatable policy around tax and it passes, why is it that we cannot see this money in the other side? Possibly this could be the reason. You come, maybe you are earning some money here, the government takes it at the payee level. Napenda kuita unakatia stima kwa transformer. You know, when money is deducted from your payee, ni kama stima imekatiwa kwa transformer. So it actually never reaches your hands. Now when you cut money from the payee level, when you cut money at that level, let's say in my disposable income, you already knock off 8,000 shillings from it. That is the money you are sending your uncle somewhere in Nyamira. That is the money you are sending your auntie somewhere in Kisii. Now, you no longer send them that money. So they no longer buy that sugar they were buying through the transfer you are doing. So you have cut money here at the payee level, but the same money denies you correction at the VAT level. Those are some of the things we have to work around, so that even as we increase taxes, then we are not handicapping the same revenue collection. There is another thing I want to talk about very briefly, which you have to be vigilant as a country. In Nigeria is one of the economies, by the way, which are very good. It has very rich people in terms of, in Africa, you only get black billionaires, majority of them being domiciled in Lagos, Nigeria, out of Nigerian money. Now, Dangote cement, BOA cement, they grew around what? You come and put in some duty for imports of the commodities they manufacture, primarily cement. By that time, when you put duty on cement, I'm using Nigeria, you end up having a big conglomerate and several of them. Number one, of course, we know Dangote cement, BOA cement, there is also Lafarge and the others. So now you cut off imports. It's a good thing, fine. The question is, for how long? You cutting off meaning you build a wall of tariff, not necessarily a non-tariff barrier, but a tariff one. So you put in a wall. This wall should incentivize this local production to be efficient so that their products can compete with the global ones. But then you overstay with that policy. So Nigeria, by beginning of this year, had the highest cement prices in Africa. Can you see that oxymoron? The biggest producers had the highest cement prices in Africa and had the highest cement margins almost in the world.
Simply because the economy will always have withdrawal symptoms. I'm not an economist, but I remember the few economic, the few IRD lessons that I went through were told about withdrawal symptoms, that people withdraws from that economy, from that ecosystem. And I want us to take time and listen to this explanation from Nyoro. Give it to him. And I know the president, remember what even caused the protest last year? There were things like even taxing pads, sanitary towels for our girls. And you could see university students in the street simply because there were things that people felt this was too much. And then the government tried to argue on protectionism. Of course, one of the principles that governs taxation is that protectionism, where you want to protect an industry. But that, as it may, it also has its own demerits, and is given an example of what happened in Nigeria, coming out clearly that much as that you can say, I want to tax, I want to impose a wall so that not much is imported here, and then you provide incentives to local producers, but it also creates some very unusual monopoly. Now, the other point, lastly, is about budgeted corruption. In fact, let me say this. There is no need for the last 10 years, Kenya Revenue Authority has never achieved their target. And I think even policymakers around budget understand that there is no need of budgeting that I want to spend 3.4 trillion. That's what I want. That's my budget. And then at the end of the day, I know that I want to collect 2.8. That is my approximation. Budget is done in a lot of positivity. But for subsequent governments have always been over budgeting so that they start creating crisis mid the regime. What is called budgeted corruption. And I agree with what Nyoro is saying there. Saying we will build 100,000 kilometers of roads. We'll build X number of hospitals. I don't know, we'll do which dam, we'll do what. That is not the budget. The budget is what we've funded, what we've been able to fund. And for example, even if, it's very understandable, ukiwa kwa nyumba, come up na list before in the supermarket. That list, that wish list, us, we call that wish list our budget. And we go to the people and tell, and so people become very futuristic. Our budget is very futuristic. But in real sense, what Exchequer can fund should be our budget. So as we go, if we want to turn around things, if Mbadi wants to change his regime, we should not see a very futuristic budget of we want to spend 4.2 trillion. No. We can only collect 2.6 trillion. Can we do budget with what we can fund first? And of course, the president is in a big crisis. The crisis is the tax question. And I want to tell you why. It's increasingly becoming very difficult for president to navigate the 2025-2026 finance bill. I had seen some people had even started saying that we don't need a finance bill. You know, the country is waiting for finance bill. So shockingly, from somewhere, finance bill 2024 took people to the streets. If you joke around with what's coming next, you might end up with another June 2024. But this is why the tax question is challenging for the president. There is a total colossal collapse of the social services. You know, I like comparing ourselves to the European countries. There, yes, they are heavily taxed, but education system is working. Health services are available. The pension schemes are being paid. And things are moving. I know in this channel, there are Kenyans who normally tell me, Kevin, say, I even retired, but I still get my pension. In this country, second term is going to open. Schools are going to open for the second term. The school principals are yet to get capitation. In this country, counties are yet to get the devolution fund. Third month consecutive. In this country, we are talking about a social health fund that is riddled with delays and complaints and failure of government to inject the required money. So when people can go to the hospital and they are forced to go and buy drugs in private facilities, then even when you talk about taxation, they don't get it. Number two, there is a weak parade on corruption, and it's demoralizing taxpayers' money. There is a story about money swindled in some Swiss bank. The corruption is demoralizing even the people. You look at it and you're like, this is not what I want to see. The parliamentarians will not risk repeating the mistakes of 2024. You know, in 2024, MPs exposed how, allow me to use this word, how shallow they are. You forcefully pass a finance bill and plunge the country in total chaos, because apparently now you believe it was the right thing and you're taking orders from State House. The next day, after causing mayhem in the country, you are paraded in State House and clapping for the president because the president is saying he's withdrawing that finance bill. What kind of thinking is that? And to date, the members of parliament whose jobs are hanging on that 2024 finance bill, they are yet even to recover. So president knows that this is the time that people will pull strings. I would really wonder how the ODM team will come out and support that finance bill. And the president knows that if he makes a mistake, then that will be the start start of departure. The other third issue disturbing the president is Raila Odinga team that axis is very weak. I've never seen a president depending on such a very thin, a needle, this is something that you can't you can't believe on. And he knows, even with Mbadi there, these people can jump out of that ship anytime, anywhere. But I still believe the country needs to listen, politics aside, as we maneuver our way to 2025 finance bill. There is every need to listen to what Nyoro is saying. Thank you.